everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Please note that this session is being recorded, and we'd like to start off today by introducing Leah Anderson, who is the lead of HUD's HCV Landlord Task Force. Leah?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm really excited about today's webinar. We will be talking with you about the last really substantive chapter of the HCV Landlord Strategies Guidebook for PHAs that's being released very soon. So it's really exciting to be here sharing that with you. As you all know, we're experiencing around the country really tight rental markets. There's also an unprecedented amount of funding available for vouchers, and so working with landlords is really important. And the chapter that we're going to talk about today, landlord-focused customer service, is something that can be embedded into a lot of your existing business practices, as well as some innovative things you can add on to what you're already doing. So thank you for being here. I'm really excited to share this chapter with you. And we have 3 housing authorities here with us today as well. And I know you all appreciate hearing from your peers. So hopefully you enjoy the webinar and get something out of it. And the chapter will be posted very soon. As soon as it is, you will all be notified. So stay tuned for that. And with that, Sarah, turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Leah. My name is Sarah Fiala. I'm a Senior Project Director with First Pink Inc. We are a TA provider who's been working with the HUD HCV Task Force. Welcome to the 6th webinar. As Leah mentioned, today we are going to be talking about the final chapter, strategy chapter of the guidebook titled Landlord Focused Customer Service Strategies. This chapter has not yet been published. It's in the very final stages of clearance. So you're really getting quite the little sneak peek today. And what we're planning on doing is really just giving you a very basic overview of the guidebook and of the chapter. Again, really just sort of a high-level overview sneak peek. We really would encourage you to go through and read the chapter itself. So that's the first half of today, but the majority of today we are really going to dedicate to talking with our 3 PHA panelists and hearing real-life experience about how they're providing customer service to their landlords. Just a very couple of quick housekeeping notes. Questions, you can submit them today throughout today's webinar using the chat feature on your screen. We're going to dedicate time at the end of today for Q&A. And I know that we have a mix of both PHAs, landlords, and industry groups on today's call. So we just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day and joining us. We are really excited. We want to hear from you. Your feedback is really what's driven the development of the guidebook and the resources. So we're really excited to hear from you and hopefully can answer any questions that you have. So that's going to be a lot of today's presentation as well. This really is for you to give you the opportunity to ask some questions. So just another couple of quick notes. Today we are defining landlord as rental property owners, managers, assistant managers, real estate brokers who are involved in rental housing, etc. And then finally, any specific vendors that might get mentioned in today's webinar are not endorsed by HUD. Okay, so just sort of a very brief overview of the guidebook. If you have seen webinar 1, we go into much greater detail, but we'll just really kind of breeze through the first couple of slides. If you've seen the previous webinars, these slides will look very familiar. I'm going to not dwell on them. Again, I encourage you to go back and watch webinar 1 if this is something you want a little bit more information on. But the guidebook is based on information that we gathered over the past couple of years from discussions with landlords during our landlord listing forums, as well as discussions with PHAs and recent research. And again, so I'd encourage you to go see webinar 1, and we can put the link to that in the chat. So the purpose of the guidebook is really to share strategies that PHAs can implement to improve landlord participation in the HCV program. You can see these 6 strategy target areas that the strategies are designed to address. Not every strategy covers all 6, but this is the goal throughout the entire guidebook, is to really address these target areas. So we have been publishing the chapters as they have been completed. As I mentioned, today's chapter, Landlord-Focused Customer Service, is in the final stages of clearance, along with the introduction, choosing the right strategies, and 3 points and conclusions. And I believe those chapters will be discussed in our final webinar, which will probably be a little bit later this year or early next year. Another thing that we are going to be doing once all of the final chapters are published is, because we've developed them and published them in pieces, we're going to go back and make some updates, add some cross references if any policies or things like that have changed. Since the date of publication, we'll update that as well. And just a note on sort of how to use the guidebook. We really encourage you to read the entire guidebook as well as each entire chapter, because each chapter really contains, as you'll sort of see today, a number of strategies and variations on that strategy. So even if a particular strategy doesn't fit your PHA or your PHA's needs exactly, you may find that there are tips or related information that might be relevant and transferable to whatever strategy you might choose to implement. So again, if you haven't checked it out, I would highly advise you to go take a look at the HUD HCV Landlord Resources webpage. It's continually being updated. You can find the guidebook here. You can find links to past webinars and symposiums, as well as some really great resources for both landlords and for PHAs. So moving on to the landlord-focused customer service chapter. Again, this is sort of a very high-level walk through the chapter, a little bit of a teaser. So certainly the chapter goes into much greater detail than we're going to talk about today. But if you have read any of the other chapters, some of the things that we talk about today are probably going to seem pretty familiar to you. This is because customer service really is woven throughout the entire guidebook and is the backbone of a lot of the strategies that we discuss. So what this chapter does is it really pulls customer service out as a strategy of its own and takes a closer look at directing specific customer service efforts directly towards landlords, both in terms of being responsive and providing information, but really making efforts to make landlords feel like the valued partners that they are. And this is something that many landlords voiced as missing during our conversations with them. And as you can see, this chapter has 3 strategies: landlord customer service responsiveness, landlord point of contact, and also a call center. So before we really jump into the chapter, I just wanted to take one step back and sort of talk about what is customer service. So you can see the definition, the assistance or advice provided by an organization to people who use its products or services. One of the underlying themes and critical elements of customer service is the manner in which customer service is delivered is just as important as the information or services that are actually being offered or provided. So the how customer service delivered is really just as important as what is actually being provided. And as I mentioned before, customer service really should be the backbone of any strategy, and also can really enhance any strategy that a PHA might choose to implement. So the first strategy in this chapter is landlord customer service responsiveness. And this strategy looks at ways that a PHA can incorporate principles that prioritize efforts for landlords into an already existing culture of customer service. We know that customer service really is a point of pride for many PHAs who really are dedicated to meeting the needs of their program participants and other audiences. However, I think it might be fair to also acknowledge that sometimes the reality of those efforts aren't always received as intended. For example, many landlords see that customer service efforts are being directed toward voucher families, but don't necessarily feel like they're also valued partners. During the task force, some of the activities identified landlord concerns with difficulties with connecting with HCV staff, having their issues addressed, and also receiving information, correct information, in a timely manner. So this strategy focuses on a culture shift among PHA and HCV staff, really to elevate customer service towards landlords, and not necessarily involving an increase or a reorganization of staffing. The PHA you might decide that this is needed after you sort of examine your practices, but this is not necessarily something that's required. So it's much more of a mindset and a culture shift. So next, we're going to take a look at how a PHA might implement or enhance their current customer service practices. As I mentioned before, several of these recommendations are addressed throughout the guidebook, but here they're specifically address how the practices can be used to improve customer service within the PHA, particularly when working with landlords. So when looking at landlord and customer service overall, PHA should really take a look at your current practices. So how are you providing customer services to landlords currently? And reviewing practices, not just customer service practices, but practices and overall is definitely, again, a theme throughout the guidebook, and something that we really highly encourage PHAs to do regularly, and particularly prior to implementing a new strategy. So of course, before you think about change, you really want to have an understanding of what your current practice is and identify those areas for improvement. We also encourage PHAs to think about all of the different types of staff that might have interactions with landlords and not just HCV staff. For example, front desk staff might experience different types of interactions with landlords than dedicated HCV staff might. And I think one of the really important things to clarify and call out here is that the goal of this review is not to single out any particular person or role, but it's really just to identify current practices and expand perspectives. And PHAs, when they're doing this, you really want to be careful not to inadvertently decrease the focus on traditional PHA clients, but really to have as your goal to create change that would better support families and also landlords. So when looking at current or future practices, these are some principles of responsive customer service to keep in mind. Some of these are very simple, but I think sometimes it's some of the simple things that can sort of be taken for granted and sort of lapse over time. So I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. So communicating with professionalism, obviously that's very important to keep a professional tone, and that should also be in both written and oral communication. Welcoming environment, so setting a really great first impression. So entries and lobbies should present inviting and have clear signage. Frontline staff, such as reception, should offer a warm welcome, and that can really set the stage that a person or landlord's requests are going to be met. Again, first impressions, super important for establishing that relationship. Practice active listening. I think that the important thing here is to really note that empathy and concern do not necessarily mean that you're in agreement with what's being said. And then realistic time frame. So responding in a timely manner, that's really a hallmark of good customer service. Providing realistic expectations for a response is really more important than the actual response time. So good practice is to include this information in, let's say, a voicemail message or an auto email response. Just something like, thank you so much for your inquiry. We will get back to you within 48 hours. And of course, you also want to provide contact information for emergencies, but just setting up that expectation and giving a realistic time frame for a response is really important. It's better to be within a longer time frame than to continually be missing shorter time frames. And then de-escalation. So this is sort of, again, wrapped up into active listening. The goal here really is to reduce emotional reactions from both parties so that the conversation can really focus and respond to the issues at hand. And then know your program well. The HCV program can be really complex. So staff that are responsible for interacting with landlords should have the training needed to provide accurate information. And as a side note, Not everyone is going to be able to answer every single question. That's completely unrealistic. But it's really better to say, I don't know, let me get back with you, than to provide inaccurate or confusing information. And then something that's not listed here, but I think is important to call out is supporting staff. So frequent training and practice really can provide staff with the skills they need to effect good customer service and provide them with the support that they need to effectively communicate with landlords. And these principles are really just used to guide internal discussion. So, ask yourself, are these things being done consistently, and are they being done for landlords? And so 3 other areas to highlight when looking at an overall approach to customer service. Again, some of these are tied to the previous slide, I think, but are worth noting again. Reviewing written communication. This is another theme. If you've read any of the other chapters, this is something that you've heard before, but we really emphasize to periodically take a look at your written documents, take a look at your communication, and make sure that your forms accessible. Are they up to date? Are they easy to understand? Setting reasonable expectations. A lot of the conflicts that arise between landlords, PHAs, and voucher families really arise from misunderstandings of roles and responsibility. Who is responsible for what are each party, the limitations that each party might have, what are you able to do? So setting these upfront expectations can really reduce confusion down the road. Orientations, that's a really great opportunity to establish roles and responsibilities and the type of support landlords can expect right from the get-go. And they're also really key to starting that PHA landlord relationship off to a good start. We do provide more information about orientations in the education and outreach chapter, which again is linked, is on the website. And then accepting unit listings. So maybe a little bit out of the box, but PHAs might want to consider helping landlords in connecting more easily with voucher holders by accepting unit listings. And by incorporating landlords into the search process, it really can benefit voucher families and landlords. So again, that dual goal of increasing customer service to both groups. So the next strategy is landlord point of contact. And this looks at identifying a single point of contact or a team of staff that are designated to provide outreach and education to landlords and also respond to landlord inquiries. In our discussions with PHAs, this was the strategy that by far was identified as having one of the greatest impacts, positive impacts on landlord recruitment and engagement. And this position or role was implemented many different ways and covered a lot of ground. So the strategy is broken up into 3 sections: typical responsibilities, job qualifications, and funding sources. And we'll run through each one of those in just a minute. But the title, landlord point of contact, the position title varied from PHA to PHA. Some PHAs use the term landlord liaison. This role typically had responsibilities focused on landlord service. Other PHAs have housing locators or housing navigators. And this person might work with landlords, but also might help families find housing and negotiate with landlords. For simplicity's sake, for this chapter, we're going to use the title landlord point of contact. And that's a mouthful, and you'll hear me say it a lot throughout today's presentation. So some typical responsibilities. Many of the landlord points of contact that we spoke with identified responding to inquiries as one of their primary responsibilities, and also one that accounted for a good portion of their workload. The ways that landlords contacted them varied, but really 3 main categories were phone, emails, and also walk-ins. And the inquiries are managed and routed in different ways, but a few common methods are for phone lines, landlord point of contacts either had a direct phone line where landlord could call them directly, or calls are routed from a main line to the landlord point of contact, or maybe there was a dedicated line for landlords that multiple staff offered, answer. But here again, not all calls can get answered in the first ring. That's just not feasible. But as we discussed previously, PHA should set a reasonable and realistic time frame for returning calls, and let landlords know what that time frame is. Email contact was similar to phone. Landlord points of contact either had a direct email to be contacted at, or there was a general landlord email. And several landlord points of contact that we spoke with really stressed the importance of creating templates for common inquiries. These, of course, can be tailored to individual requests, but it really saved them a lot of time and sort of made responses consistent. And then finally, walk-ins. These are a little bit harder to manage, as the landlord point of contact is not always available to meet, but PHA should really try to provide whatever information they can, and then make sure to set up an appointment for a future date so that the landlord point of contact and then landlord can get together. So another very typical responsibility of the landlord point of contact was outreach to current and prospective landlords. Current landlord outreach might include support, problem solving, education, gauging the satisfaction in the program. And this really can be done through a variety of ways: events, large and small events, virtual events, one-on-one meetings. And again, we discussed some of the different outreach methods in the education and outreach chapter. But here it's sort of important to note that the landlord point of contact really is the ideal person to conduct this outreach, so that they can hear firsthand from landlords about their experiences, both positive and negative, with the program. And then really use this knowledge to address issues, perhaps either through training events or one-on-one contact. They also can use an event platform to provide new information to groups of landlords and maybe dispel any myths. And events led by the landlord point of contact also really enforces that they're available to assist. They're here to help landlords, and really puts a face with the program. And they're also, landlord points of contact are really ideal to attend events to generate interest in the program and increase the visibility of the PHA. They're sort of a natural fit to conduct one-on-one outreach with current and prospective landlords. And again, they really personalize the PHA and the HCV program, and reinforce the idea that landlords are valuable partners. And then finally, on this point, some PHAs do also use data to identify new or prospective landlords. And we do talk about some sample sources of data and how those can be used in the chapter. So in a similar vein to outreach, recruitment of new landlords is also typically a responsibility of the landlord point of contact. And recruitment can be woven into many of the outreach methods that I just talked about. But the landlord point of contacts really should be very well versed in the benefits of the program, and be able to articulate these to potential landlords. They should also be aware of common misconceptions about the program and be able to address, dispel sort of those myths. Mediation. Landlord points of contact are also very well suited to intervene into conflicts that a landlord might have with voucher families. This can be a really effective strategy to maintain current landlords who otherwise might choose to leave the program out of frustration. It can be a little bit tricky, as the PHA does have a relationship with both landlords and voucher families, but in the chapter we do share some tips on how this can be done while maintaining a level of neutrality. And the landlord point of contact can also work to intervene in issues that a landlord might have with another department in the PHA, for example, issues surrounding HAP. And then some landlord points of contact are also involved in the inspections process. We know that this is a sticky point for some landlords. So for example, some are certified to conduct housing inspections and can offer a sort of soft inspection, identifying any problems prior to the actual inspection, giving the landlord additional time to prepare, and some sort of removing that element of surprise. So all of the PHAs that we spoke to that had landlord points of contact really emphasized that finding the right person for this position was critical to its success. So some PHAs focused on finding someone with prior HCV or a background on housing, while others might have preferred to hire someone with a social services or a real estate backgrounds. But regardless, all PHAs had in common that they really suggested that personality played a very large role into success. A lot of the position revolves around communication. So someone that's really outgoing and comfortable talking to large groups was really important. And then there are multiple ways to fund this position. A lot of the PHAs that we spoke with use multiple funding sources. And you can see on the slide, I'm not going to go through them all, but we just list a few of the different funding source examples. And again, I would encourage you to go check out the guidebook for more detailed information. So if a dedicated position might not be a great fit for your PHA, there really are several other ways to create and foster relationships with landlords. For example, we talked about orientation. That really can provide face-to-face, even virtually, face-to-face connection and provide information, setting landlords up for success. And just having that personal interaction and sort of being able to put a face with the name is really helpful. Some PHAs also talked about holding a landlord dedicated day. So setting aside a certain day of the week or a certain day of the month that landlords know that they can call in or walk in or connect somehow to ask questions and receive information, and sort of providing them with that security of knowing that there's a set aside date and time when they can present their questions and receive a direct response. So there's just a couple alternatives to having a dedicated position. And then the final strategy in this chapter is a call center. So this strategy looks at some of the reasons a PHA might decide to implement a call center and outline setup, staffing, and costs. So call centers can be really useful for PHAs that have a very high volume of calls. Typically calls come into an initial automated menu or an interactive voice response system. The IVR also allows landlords to access information at any time, very similar to an online portal. And one of the big benefits to call center is that they allow other HCV staff really to carry out their responsibilities with fewer interruptions throughout the day. And it also connects landlords with information without sort of delay. You don't have to wait for someone to call you back. So training is a really critical component to ensuring that call center staff are able to answer questions and provide accurate information. And this strategy really is typically geared towards PHAs that have an overwhelming call volume. So if you're thinking about implementing, here's some things to consider. Scope, you want to think about, will the call center serve the entire PHA or just the HCV program? You're going to want to look at what is the current volume of calls that you have, what are some of the topics that get asked or the information that's requested, and what are the number of calls that might require a secondary referral. PHAs also will need to select a software provider and work with them to configure menus. You want to be really careful about how you set that up. Again, landlords can become frustrated if you get rerouted too many times. And then PHAs also want to think about how they might roll out this change to a call center. So if landlords are used to calling one individual, you're going to want to make sure you walk them through how calling into a call center is going to work. And then in addition to sort of acclimating landlords to that transition, PHAs really need to dedicate the time and resources to training call center staff. Oops, I think I skipped a slide. Sorry about that. So this might require a departmental shift, moving some existing staff around, or even taking some time in hiring and training brand new staff. And then finally, costs, call center costs, typically very high and can include startup costs, setup, training, and then even some ongoing costs. So for PHAs that might not be able to implement a call center, either the call center volume is not great enough to warrant the expense, or funding perhaps is a challenge, there are several alternatives. Staff can rotate on telephone duty. PHAs could consider, again, creating that dedicated landlord day. And even phone systems can be reconfigured, simple phone systems, and use call routing or call trees, just to make it more efficient for landlords to call in and get connected with the person and information that they're looking for. Okay, so now we've reached the part of today's webinar that I think most people had probably been waiting for, really hearing from our guest panel of PHAs. So we have 3 PHAs who are going to share about how they've implemented customer service practices at their PHAs, and these are really terrific examples of how customer service can be implemented different ways and really tailored to meet the needs of the unique communities and PHAs that are there. So our panelists today include Carlos Van Natter, who's the director of the Section 8 program from the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles, Dee Pouliot, the managing director of the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, and Corina Serrano, who's the HCV programs manager at the St. Paul Public Housing Agency. All of these 3 PHAs have also participated in some of our focus groups, so we're really excited and thankful to have them here today. We've asked each to share a little bit about their PHA and their approach to customer service. Then we'll have a little bit of a panel discussion, and then we're going to go ahead and open up for Q&A. But with that, I am going to turn things over to Carlos. Hello, everybody. During the live webinar, we experienced a little bit of audio feed during Carlos's presentation, but very happily, thanks to technology, we're able to re-record his presentation, and we're insert it here in lieu of the original recording. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Carlos Van Natter, the director of the Section 8 program from the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. Carlos?
Hello, everybody, and thanks for making this accommodation, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk with you about HACLA's Customer Contact Center. You know, HACLA is the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. And first, as a little background, we are a big housing authority. We have over 50,000 clients. We have over 13,400 landlords and over 350 staff. We do get a high volume of calls. Prior to implementation of our Customer Contact Center, we were receiving 225,000 calls per year, and that resulted in a level of customer service that we were not pleased with. One of the biggest complaints we would get from tenants and landlords is that our staff was not answering the phone or did not get back to the caller, and that just was not satisfactory. So we worked on implementing a Customer Contact Center. This is aligned with our vision plan, which has elements for people, place, and pathways. People is obviously an essential part of our strategy, and we know that owners are our crucial partners in the program. So we wanted to make sure that we were providing the level of service that they expected and that we wanted to provide. So we worked at implementing the Customer Contact Center. To do that, we did research amongst other public agencies in the area. We visited LA County Department of Public Social Services, LA County Department of Mental Health, all of which were agencies that receive a high volume of calls because we wanted to understand how they were performing this function. We got good ideas and ways to implement our program. So we were able to piggyback on a state contract to execute with a provider, a big company you've all heard about. And what we committed to our Board of Commissioners is that we would staff the Customer Contact Center with existing staff. We would shift people around. There'd be no net increase in staff because we believe that by focusing our attention on a Customer Contact Center with specific agents in that center, we could pull folks away from the other areas as that volume of work decreased in those areas. So what we did was we created a new classification called Customer Service Representative, and using some contact center staffing calculators, there's one called Erlang out there, our vendor had another, we arrived at a number of 24 customer support representatives or CSRs that we would need to launch this customer contact center. So we started with that number of agents. We have 3 supervisors in the customer contact center, 1 manager, and an assistant director that oversees the whole operations. We did an internal recruitment. As I said, to move people around within the agency, it was a promotional opportunity. We wanted a level of expertise that was already there. So we pulled people internally. And then that group that was selected went through intensive training, both internal and external. We pulled together experts from all of our different areas. And our customer contact center does assist tenants and landlords in our Section 8 program. It also assists residents in the public housing area for work orders that they may need to submit for deficiencies in their units, and also the application center of the public housing part of our operations. And then we get a lot of calls just from other folks who want other areas of the housing authority. So those are the main areas that are served by our customer contact center. We informed everybody, including landlords, through a variety of means. We have an owner newsletter that goes out every month, and we informed owners that we had implemented this customer contact center. The new phone number is on our website, and so you all can know it and call it if you like. It's HCV4U, the 4 being the number 4. So that is the is 1-888-HCV4U. We changed all of our letters to have that new phone number on it. So instead of the staff person in the office, their phone number, now all of the letters have that customer contact center HCV4U phone number on it. We also have landlord orientations, and we went over that startup of our customer contact center in those sessions as well. Now, when callers call our customer contact center, we have staff that speak 3 languages that can assist them. Of course, English, Spanish, and Armenian, which is a large population of folks that we serve in HCLA, particularly in the Section 8 area. So we have those 3. And what we found as we implemented the customer contact center is that 80% of the calls could be handled by the agents right then and there on the spot. Calls did not have to be referred back to line staff unless they were complicated issues that needed to go that route. But the vast majority of calls were handled by the agents or have been handled by the agents. And so that has been a really good thing. And that was one of the main reasons, along with providing better customer service to everybody, landlords and tenants. That was another goal that we had for the customer contact center. We wanted to offload the volume of calls that were going to the line staff. And we have seen that as a benefit of the system, that those calls have now been taken off, calls and emails have been taken off of the line staff so they can perform their duties, and they can be available for the more complex issues that they need to talk with tenants about. And I should mention too, that we're very careful to call it a customer contact center, because we don't just talk to people on the phone. We also have an email box where people can send us inquiries, and we respond to that as well through the agents of the customer contact center. So at the moment, we are doing calling and emails. Some of the future phases that we want to do include a chat function. We also want to implement an IVR, interactive voice response system. We did not have that at the start. We want to get to that, where callers could answer some of their own questions directly by accessing that system, finding out when an inspection is scheduled, that kind of thing, where they might be on the Section 8 wait list. So that's coming up in one of our next phases of the customer contact center. We also do some robocalls from this program, where we will send out messages to a large group of our clients. We send them out monthly to the Section 8 participants to remind them to complete their annual review packets. We do that on our annual reexamination packets. We also do that for our public housing clients. And we also send out a robocall regularly to our applicants in the public housing area. So some other benefits that we've seen through the implementation of the Customer Contact Center, beyond the reduction in call and email volume to the line staff, is improved call volume management. We now have a better handle on where and when the calls come in and what their dispositions are. About 40% of the calls that come into the Customer Contact Center are for Section 8, 30% are for our public housing area, and the balance are for other calls that come in. We also know that, for example, mornings are our busiest time on the Customer Contact Center. Start of the week is a busier time, Monday and Tuesday, and it kind of drops off through the week to Friday. And we can use that to make sure we have adequate staffing of our agents on the Customer Contact Center. It has improved customer satisfaction with our participants and landlords. We have received a number of thanks from people who are happy that we're able to respond to them immediately or through a callback. If call volume does get high and we have to call people back, we call most of the people back the same day. It could be next day at the latest. And also it has increased the morale of our line staff, because now they have more time to focus on their work and just handle through calls the more complicated situations that arrive on their caseloads. Now, as far as lessons learned, we have come to prepare for the unexpected, and that includes issues with the software or with the vendor, including responsiveness of the vendor when issues come up. There have been some maintenance issues where calls in the queue were lost and we had to go back and find them and call people back. Also, an interesting situation that we've had is just staff turnover in the Customer Contact Center. Of course, we have turnover in all of our positions across the agency, but it has been particularly noticed in the Customer Contact Center, mainly because this group of employees is so thoroughly trained on all aspects of the program in Section 8 and public housing issues that tenants bring up, landlords bring up, that can be resolved, that this staff is looked at very favorably for promotional opportunities, and people have been snatched out already to go to other areas of our operations. We've also had a few agents who have left the agency altogether and gone on to other customer contact centers. They've come to realize this is a whole other avenue of employment and career path, and people have moved on in that way too. So we are still early on in our implementation of the Customer Contact Center. We started in March of this year, so there's a lot we're still working through and learning and implementing. And you know, we're looking forward. It's very exciting. It's a whole new world for us, but we've embraced it. Our landlords and tenants seem to like it, and so do our staff. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Sarah to see if she's got any other questions for me or questions that we've received from some of the people tuning in.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carlos. You answered a bunch. I do have a couple. I know you talked a great deal about some of the training that went into the staff when you transitioned them over to be call center representatives, and that they really got quite a thorough training in all aspects so that they could deal with almost any kind of question that came in over the line. But how long was that training period? How much time did you sort of have to set aside to train staff up?
The initial training period was very intense. It was for 4 to 5 weeks of training, and we had an outside vendor help us on the customer service aspect and even rent calculations. But internally, we pulled together information from across our agency, information on inspections, information on our special programs. We operate every special program that HUD offers. So we have Continuum of Care, we have HOPWA, we have PBV, HUD VASH. And so pulling in information from our various units and our different experts here at HACLA, they came together with a whole big, well, it's a physical paper manual, but it's all electronic on the system too. The agents have different ways that they like to access the information. Some do it all online. Some look at their manual folders and they have all kinds of tabs. I've seen them. It's very interesting. But a lot of information was provided to the agents and they use it daily. They have to because they are receiving so many calls. And, you know, with time, they have gotten better with responding to calls. We had certain staff in the customer contact center who were already experts in a certain area, like inspections. So some of the agents would go to those and say, oh, help me with this. What's the best response for this kind of question? And we would incorporate that as responses for the whole group. We have some Q&As for the agents to use on the most typical types of questions that we get. But we did a lot of internal training from information that we already have.
So, and just to clarify, you provided both training on like general customer service, how to respond to calls, and then also provided programmatic specific training.
Exactly. And so on the customer service side, also how to diffuse situations with irate callers. I've talked to a few agents and they have told me how they have, you know, talked people off the ledge for whatever various reasons, maybe not necessarily just a hold up on the housing authority end, but they need referrals to other services, even suicide prevention, you name it. They hear all kinds of things on the phones and they make appropriate referrals when that makes sense.
Great. And then, so I know the training is a big component, but what about the planning period overall? How long would you say that you really spent? I know you did a lot of research, talked to a lot of other agencies out there. Sort of from the beginning thoughts that you might want to implement something like this to sort of the first day that the phone sort of rang. How long was that planning period?
Well, for us, we really started our initial thinking and planning on this at the end of last year. And then we started hiring the agents in January and February, and we went live in March. So I would say from the initial time when we started actively working on implementing the center, it's probably about 6 months. But I can tell you, this has been a couple years in the making, thinking about what is the best way for us to go about this? How can we really address our customer service issue and our image to the public, particularly landlords?
And then I know that you mentioned you were a center and not just calls. So how do you divide up the calls and the email, responding to calls and emails? Is it sort of just whoever has time to pick up emails, or do you have staff dedicated to just doing emails or just doing calls?
It does go by the volume. We have a lot more calls than emails, but what we do on the emails is we do dedicate a subset of the group of 24 agents to work on the emails. I believe now it's 3 folks that work on that exclusively, responding to emails, and we're rotating through our group so everyone gets experience working on both sides of the house. I can tell you too that through COVID, we've actually received more calls than we did prior. And that makes sense because we're doing everything over the phone or over the computer or through the mail. Our offices still have not opened. We're hoping that we can maybe do that by the first of the new year. So as talking to people on the phone is a primary way for people to get in touch with us and resolve their issues, our call volume has increased. And actually, for the length of time that the call center has been in place, for the first 6 months, we actually received almost 209,000 calls, and that is almost equal to what we had received in the whole year prior to the customer contact center.
Wow.
So call volume is way up. Some of what I hear anecdotally from staff is now people are so happy to actually get someone on the phone. They think of other questions. And one thing we found is the call length has gone longer. It used to be call length was about 3 minutes per call. It's going to 5 minutes. We're actually reevaluating our numbers for staff we need on the customer contact center. And for the new year, for 2022, we're actually going to add 4 more agents to the customer contact center because call volume is up and we want to be able to handle everything real time and not have to do any callbacks.
And then finally, just sort of based on your experience, what type of PHA do you think might be best suited to transition over to something like a customer contact center or a call center? I don't know if you feel like it's PHAs of a certain size or that have a certain number of certain call volume.
Well, yeah, that's kind of tough to say, specifically or definitively. I think you need the call volume there. I think you need a body or a mass of tenants and landlords. I would say at least a medium-sized housing authority, but it could even be for a smaller one that gets a lot of calls, where it could make more sense to segment off some staff to just full-time answer the phones and be more responsive to callers. So it could even be a smaller PHA that dedicates one or two staff to just do this full time, so that the other line staff in the agency can, again, focus on the work and deal with the more complicated issues. So I suppose you could implement it for any size of agency, but I think it makes more sense for the larger ones that have more staff, more volume of calls, more clients and landlords.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Carlos, for your time again. We're so happy that we were able to reconnect and share your information. I know everyone watching really appreciates it, as well as we really just want to thank you. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and switch back over to the live recording portion. And we're going to hear from Dee Pouliot, who is from the New Hampshire Housing Finance Agency. So thanks a lot, Carlos. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah, and hi, everyone. And Sarah, thank you for including New Hampshire Housing again in these panels and discussions. We have found it very helpful in all the webinars, and got some good ideas from it that we've done, in addition to, the things we've been doing for years. Like you said, it's like customer service has always been a main focus, and several years ago we did a landlord customer survey, and it came back good. So we're like, okay, good, we're responding to landlords, and that's good. But we also knew that there were things we could do to improve. It started, some landlords gave us good feedback that there was some inconsistency with the inspections, the results of the inspection reports. And Gail, who's on this call, she worked with the inspectors to make sure we had a very consistent and some training, and again, engage the landlords in those conversations. A few years ago, almost 2 years ago, we did a SWOT, our annual SWOT, part of our program plan for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we talked about the success rate in voucher holders leasing up. And we have 2 expediters, I guess it'd be like navigators. I guess I should start that. We have just over 4,200 vouchers statewide. So we have these 2 expediters who work with voucher holders and looked at ways to, again, enhance that landlord experience. We know that the landlords play a critical role in our ability to be successful and lease up. So we started with a couple things. We did a flyer. We did a flyer, and we put in every briefing packet, and we put it on our website. But general information. But if they had any questions, it was my contact, my phone number, because we wanted to make sure they had, for that group, had a single point of contact. We didn't want them bounced around to all, a call. Everybody gets kind of lost sometimes in voicemail and call, automated calls. So we don't have like a traditional call center, but we have what we call a call group, that a landlord goes to the call group, and those calls go right to the expediter or the inspector. They both are well versed and trained, and when I want to say sell the program, that the expediters are that, we do everything by phone because we are statewide. So when I say they're the face of the authority, they don't necessarily see them, but they are the ones who sell the program, answer their questions. The inspectors do negotiation with rents, but it's a conversation, and it's trying to have the landlord feel like, we want them, we value them, we need them, and we hear them. And so I think that single point of contact has been really important. And And the staff, the call group supervisors, same day contact. I think that was part of the relationship building we did. This past year, we just added an incentive, again, working with landlords with emergency housing vouchers and some hard to house groups with incentives and flyers. And we're seeing a good response with landlords, even with the emergency housing vouchers. We have 18 new landlords that we didn't have before. And, it's part of that outreach and social media, using that platform. But then when they call or want more information, they have that single point. And I got a call today and someone said, I just agreed, the landlord said, I just agreed to participate in the program and the inspector already called me. And they were very impressed by that the inspectors are right on it, and we want to increase our voucher utilization, but at the same time, we don't want the landlord wondering, when's the inspection, when am I going to see my money? And we try to, expedite that process by using DocuSign, using, again, hearing what the owner needs and expediting it so they get their payments. One of the things I said to Sarah that we started just a few months ago too is we were looking at not only customer focus, part of that was retention and landlord satisfaction. Because as much as we try to mediate disputes and listen to them as a neutral party in this contract or in this relationship, there are some times that the voucher participant leaves with damages or just disappear. It's just some things happen sometimes. So what we decided to do for that, and it's really not a lot of money, but we have found that for some reason people think it's just been a really cool idea. And it was, we had these New Hampshire housing note cards made up, very simple, and bought $50 Home Depot gift cards. It could be Home Depot or Lowe's. And we bought these $50 gift cards, and the landlord gets a personalized note that just, we don't want to lose that landlord. We don't want to damage the relationship. And we just want them to know that it's unfortunate, whatever happened. We feel bad it happened. And that we hope they will, continue with the program. And we hope that, this experience, whatever the situation is, we kind of tweak. We've only done 2. So we don't have a lot of times that we need to do this. But actually, I shared it today with another agency, and they said they were going to start doing it. But I think it's just it's a token of appreciation that, we wish we could help. We wish we could pay. We would if we could. In these cases, the participant no longer has their voucher for whatever reasons they left without notice. But I think for us, it was just to measure that landlord relationship or make an effort that what happened, but, they're handwritten, everything is handwritten on it. And, so that was something new we did. And I can't think of anything else on the list. I know Sarah gave us some talking points to cover with you, with everyone. I don't think I had anything else. It wasn't driven by anything specific. I think it was more of landlords are critical to the program, and rents are high in New Hampshire, which probably are parts of it everywhere. And vacant units are hard to come by. And we want to be that landlord's first call when there's a vacant unit. That was really kind of the underlying goal of this, and we will be doing another landlord survey hopefully next year, and just to again assess that, is there something else we could be doing differently, or what a landlord needs from us. But we have found, I talked to a landlord yesterday, who just called and said, I know nothing about your program. And so it's just getting that call back within over the same day, and getting them the information they need and answering their questions. And then we do, like Sarah had on the website, you know, the vacant unit list. We do have a vacant unit list on our website where the landlord can list their vacant units, or they can just share it with us internally. And we have a group that gets those. And right away, when we share a vacant unit, they contact all voucher holders immediately. So there's no waiting around because that vacant unit is not going to stay vacant very long. And that's where, you know, the expediters have really helped us improve that customer response to the landlord and getting quick, easy access to the voucher holders to say, you know, here's the information, the landlord just called us. Because if they, you know, if they don't act on it, the landlord's going to list that unit elsewhere. We may not be their first call. I think that covers my presentation, Sarah, unless there was anything else that you wanted me to add.
No, thanks, Dee. Just a couple of questions for you. How many landlords do you have?
We have about 1,900 landlords for 4,200 vouchers.
Okay, and do you have an estimate of how many calls and messages you receive a week or a month or whatever time period you might be able to give us a ballpark number for?
I don't, because they come in through the call group and then get transferred to the expediters. I mean, the expediters will tell us, and the inspectors, they're on the phone a lot. But you know, they're always on the phone with landlords. But we don't really know or track that. We know like when we get new landlords to the program, I was trying to assess that, you know, what are these incentives getting new landlords? And like the emergency housing vouchers that we just got, and those came with money, you know, for incentives and security deposits and stuff. So that was helpful for us to know, you know, how many new landlords did we get from that? And is it because of that, you know, does that really help lease up when you have some, you know, incentives and stuff? But
And so I know that is very similar to a lot of other PHAs that we've talked to, that they're really on the phone and responding to these inquiries. And there are quite a high volume. So how do staff sort of juggle their time and responsibilities? Do you have any tips to share about how to sort of manage responding, being responsive, and then also a lot of the other duties that those individuals?
No, that's a good question, because the expediters, it's a unique skill set. It is, we found the two right people to do it. We didn't always have expediters. Everybody kind of just did their thing and tried to lease up, and whoever, whether it was, you know, an inspector or a staff person, and to concentrate the voucher holders with two people, then I would say they still have a caseload. They still do have a caseload, but they are able, they're just the right people for it. They don't have as big a caseload as the others necessarily, but they find time to take care of their voucher holders, become a daily part of their day, and that they deal, you know, with their voucher holders, whether it's extensions, landlord relationships, but when they get a request for tenancy approval, that becomes their first priority. And they work very closely with the 4 inspectors. So it's a constant flow of right from the expediter to the inspectors. And it gets, you know, so we probably could use another expediter sometimes, but we're very fortunate. I think for that role, it has to be somebody who really who likes that. You know, you're the salesperson, you're the face of the authority, you're talking to landlords, and you're deciding whether to give voucher extensions. They have spreadsheets, they track all the voucher holders' barriers to lease up. So, they're constantly either trying to connect them with services or agencies that can help with their barriers, having them apply at any, low-income housing tax credit properties that do accept vouchers. Anything Finding Spring, New Hampshire Housing must accept vouchers. So they're constantly working that, all that information, with their holders.
Sort of one additional, I know you mentioned a survey, and I love the idea of, getting feedback and putting that out there and asking, like, what are things that we're doing well? What are things that you would like to see improved? Are your surveys, can you just give an idea of like the types of questions you have? Are they the yes or no? And I think you said you do that by mail, but I can't remember. I'm not quite sure.
The one we did was a long time ago, and it was the old-fashioned way by mail, and they returned it, in a prepaid envelope, and we just manually sorted through them into kind of Excel spreadsheet, and we could sort them. Actually, they had a code, so we kind of knew who they were, who the staff person was. But that was, oh gosh, 5+ years ago. And then Gail worked on the owner portal, and part of the portal is we figured, when we get all these owners in the portal, it will be a lot easier to do a survey through SurveyMonkey, something easy that will just, again, give us that feedback that is there anything, we could do, are their payments are on time, their inspections are on time, their satisfaction, can they reach their staff person, do they, whatever they need. So we haven't got that far yet with what our survey will look like for next year, but we were waiting to get, a little bit more landlords into the portal, and then get the questions that, what their experience is.
And I just got a question in the chat for you, Dee. Could you please just elaborate a little bit on some of the role and the tasks that expediters and sort of how they really are key to facilitating the overall process for landlords?
How the expediters are?
Yes, correct.
I don't know if it wasn't, we've had what we called expediters every once in a while. Like one time we got this allocation of vouchers from HUD, and we're like, oh my gosh, we put one person on it, and it worked. And then the next year we go back to our normal staff assignments, and then we have like, all of a sudden we got, an extra $1 million, and we got to issue all these vouchers. So then we decided a few years ago, well, clearly the expediter process works, but it was hard figuring out what should their caseload be. So they kind of drive that a little bit. We had a couple of people who were doing it, and they enjoyed it. And then we have thought of that though, like, what if they leave? What if, they get promoted someday? Like, we need people who really clearly enjoy, and the training they got of it. I think, and Gail's on the call too, but I think they were just they did do all these sessions, all these webinars that HUD has been hosting for the landlord engagement. They've done all of them, and I think they're the ones who came up with the gift card and the personalized note or something they heard. So they come back, they participate in them all. They've been really engaged and active in it, and then they come back with ideas or things that we could do differently. But trying to use DocuSign a lot, trying to expedite the process. Once they get a landlord, the goal is don't lose that landlord. They get a call on a vacant unit. I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah, Gail might have more to that.
Yeah, if I can just add a little bit more, I would say that, they try to break down the barriers. They're the boots on the ground, and they communicate to, to Dee and to I about what are the barriers and how can we remove those barriers. So it is their goal is to, get as many people leased up as they can. And I think they're both very passionate, and I think that's we're very fortunate.
And we meet once a month. So today was the meeting. So what Gail does is she does the forecasting tool, the vouchers on the street every month. That's Gail's role. And then we meet, Gail and I, the supervisors and the expediters. the inspector. And we meet and go over everything. Is it a FUP? Is it a mainstream? Is it a VASH, a PBV? Whatever it is, we go through, and they tell us real time how many RFTAs they got, which they do that daily. But we again summarize, and then we know, what's working, what's not working. We just expanded some of those incentives. We went to our board a couple weeks ago and said, can we expand them? Like, we're having a hard time with mainstream. So, we've expanded those to help, hopefully that will help lease up. But this is a lot of feedback we get from the expediters too. It's like Gail said, they're tracking the barriers. So they'll say, this one needs, she's in a wheelchair. And it's like, okay, let's look at all the tax credit properties that have barrier-free units, because we know they are required to have some accessibility. And they're connecting that with their voucher holders to apply at those properties. So sometimes the property has a 6-month wait, and we'll extend the voucher for 6 months. So we know we know whatever that barrier is, and we know that there will be a lease up that's coming. So they're constantly having them apply and helping them apply at the new properties.
Great, thanks. And I know we have a few more questions that came in, but I'll hold those. But I would like to turn things over to Karina Serrano from St. Paul Public Housing Agency to share some of their customer service strategies.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Great.
Thanks. So I'm Karina Serrano. I'm with the St. Paul PHA in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so something that we implemented when I came on, it wasn't a big initiative necessarily. It was kind of just more, we were restructuring and we felt this was probably the best fit. I came on and took over inspection supervising, and we just had a lot of interactions at the inspections level with owners. So we decided that owners should kind of be focused for one point of contact at the supervisor level, because most of their questions were about inspections. And then they could also get some of those higher level explanations or questions answered, or introductions to the program at that supervisory level. So then that was assigned to me at the time, because I was overseeing inspections. And in that role, we also implemented a landlord advisory group that met quarterly. And it was first a kind of a volunteer group of landlords, and we kind of received periodic feedback on what we were doing well, what we could improve on, some common areas that they had concerns on or questions. And then we also offered annual, I don't want to say trainings, but we did offer some trainings at these annual meetings we had with owners. We would invite them at a community space, have some presentations, and provide lunch, and then we'd also have all our staff there. So there was also a time that we could all interact with the owners as well. This was pre-COVID. We haven't had any of those since COVID. We've also kind of suspended our landlord advisory group meetings at the time being as well. But we, in that role too, we also did new landlord orientations as well. So it's the same person managing all these different aspects of landlords and new landlords, and continuing that relationship with landlords, as well as their main focus of inspections. Now that is moving on to another supervisor at the time. My role has kind of changed, but in addition to overseeing inspections, she also oversees the majority of our rent payments. So that's kind of a bigger picture now. So because the other part of where we're seeing a lot of questions are payments. So kind of that fits as well. And also her staff also deal with the landlord portal. So it's kind of all encompassing of where they are, and they're able to triage if needed. But usually anything that a landlord has a question on can be handled by that one person because they handle all those kind of levels of questions that landlords typically have. It helps build relationships with our current landlords and also establishing new ones, and kind of helps them like guide them through the process, especially when they've had them for orientation and then we're the ones handling the setup of their accounts, and then we do the inspection, and also we see them through any questions until they get payment. So that's kind of what we've seen it. It's not been set in stone. It's kind of just one kind of person for any concerns or questions that they may have. Do you have any questions or anything you wanted me to cover in particularly?
Whoops. Sorry, thanks so much, Karina. I was having some mute difficulties. Yeah, I've definitely had a couple of questions. So could you talk a little bit about some of the shifts that you've had to go through as a result of COVID? Have you had to change any of your strategies or your approach at all?
So we're definitely getting more phone calls from owners. Some of those owners that we had more of a connection in person through our annual meetings or our quarterly meetings. We're not seeing them as often or getting that feedback regularly, but the ones that were on our advisory committee, we've remained in more contact with them, just not on a regularly scheduled basis. It's more individual contacts and phone calls. And then as far as the inspections, we've had to do a lot of mailings and education and updates on our website to notify them of the changes we've implemented with COVID. And then now we are changing some of those now because we were utilizing waivers, and as those are coming up on expiration, we have been changing those and kind of rolling out information on our portals and mailings to landlords, as well as on our website, just notifying them of what's coming up and changes, and also redirecting all questions to that same person, that same main point of contact. For the most part, we haven't seen an uptick in any concerns or questions about the return to our previous practices. I think everyone would appreciate us maybe going back a little bit more often than we had been to the units as far as on the inspection side. And then on the other hand, when we did implement them, they were kind of surprised, like, oh, okay, you're not coming out. Okay, like, that's fine. Or whatever. So it didn't take a lot of convincing or explanation either way. It was just more like, oh, this is what's happening. And I think that does attest to the trust that they've built up in us based on that point of contact. Oh, and one thing I will mention is that when I was handling it, I was also one of the main point of contacts when we issued terminations, and landlords. The unfortunate side of with the program is landlords sometimes contact us when there's things that go awry, right? And they want to know what we can do, and having those conversations about that we're not the lease enforcers, but how we can enforce our program policies and what we can do in general terms, and explaining how we will uphold our program policies, and how important their partnership is to us. That I think goes a long way. And also in those cases where we do take them to like an informal hearing, we do ask the landlord, are you willing to testify? Because this will also help us uphold our policies. And I think they see that as us kind of putting their money where our mouth is. And so I think that is one thing that they do and have expressed appreciation for, which is not always the nicest side of the program, but it's part of it.
And then do you think you could sort of just walk us through like a day in the life? Like, what are some of the common tasks you see? What are the common questions you get? Like what a day, a week? Just sort of talk us through like what that actually looks like played out in real life.
Yeah, so I would say it's mostly emails about inspection related items. I would say like now in Minnesota, we're going into the winter season pretty soon here. And so a lot of things are coming up requesting for weather deferments. So right now our temperatures are already dipping, where concrete is not going to be setting very well, or paint's not going to be setting very well. So we're already kind of figuring out if things need to be deferred. And so that's what we're working with owners now. And then, or anything that they need clarification on. We've also had an uptick in movers, in move-in inspections. And so just a lot of owners contacting us asking what's the process like. They're newer. What can they expect? Do we have a list that can help them prepare? Which we do have a list of like what we commonly see that we help them, and we kind of talk through them what HQS entails. And then also how far out they can expect the inspector to be there, and then what the process looks like after the inspection happens. And then I will say that that's the majority of it. Once they get their HAP contract, occasionally there's questions about like, okay, well, when's my payment coming, and what does this mean on the HAP contract? And just going forward through that process.
And then one more for you, Karina, and then I will probably pose the same question for Dee, but what are some of the steps that you might recommend to another housing authority who might want to implement a similar strategy? Do you have any lessons learned, any tips that you think might be helpful? What kind of PHA size or volume might sort of be a best fit for sort of implementing a point of contact, a single point of contact?
Yeah, so we have about 5,100 vouchers and about a little over 1,000 owners. And I would say maybe 1 to 2 people would be an ideal size dedicated to this at least. If that's not their entire role, because in this role, this is not our entire role. So we're not able to fully dedicate just to being the point of contact. However, our other roles kind of cross over with that. So it's just kind of been a happy medium. And I would say that having it line up with inspections has really been ideal and worked out. And also maybe if that person was HQS certified or otherwise qualified to do inspections has been helpful. So when we've been booked or there's been a conflict or concern about an inspection item that an owner has expressed that is very urgent, I could just be like, okay, you know what, let's go figure it out. I can be there at what time, like let's go, let's meet if you have a concern, because I'm certified to do that. And let's say my inspectors were already previously assigned for the day for other items. And just having that availability to do that, I think takes your customer service to another level.
Thank you so much, Karina. And then Dee, I'd like to pose the same question to you. If you have any recommendations for other housing authorities that are looking to do similar things, any lessons learned that you'd like to share?
Sure. A lot with what Karina just said, you know, making that a division initiative. I think that's what we did when we did our SWAT. We kind of said, you know, it's 35 of us in the division, and it's all of us. So it's not just the expediters, it's not just the inspectors. And because tenants who want to move, you know, there's a new landlord you're leaving and finding, so all staff who work anything with, you know, direct clients. But we kind of just said that as this is a division initiative, and the landlord relation building, I I hate to get into the money side of it, but I did tell them we only get paid if they lease up. We only get paid by HUD if the voucher holder leases up. So it's important that we keep our lease up and our landlord partnership very high level, very important. And if the landlord's upset, go to the the supervisors do a lot of that de-escalating of issues, but it's I think we just made it as it's high level, it's a division priority, and it becomes in most staff a goal in their performance eval. It's like, how we're, how all customer service, right? All customer service is kind of a goal. And because we are a statewide HFA, it's part of the reputation. It's part of the authority's reputation. And one negative landlord, or, we did have a negative landlord recently, a very upset landlord who put it on Google Business or whatever, put a very negative experience because they wanted us to evict the tenant. And as much as we explained we couldn't, the landlord just sometimes does not accept or want that answer, and then you get a bad review. But that's rare. But what we try to say to staff is this is about also our reputation, and we don't want to have a reputation of not being responding to any customer service, which is why we have an 800 number, we have toll free, we have the call group, and it's being responsive to all customers.
Thanks so much, Dee. And then I saw a question come in to the chat, and I think that this is for Karina about the landlord advisory group, about how you recruit landlords and what the requirements are to join, how large that is.
So when we had our annual meetings with all our larger group of owners, and something I failed to mention is that we also send newsletters to owners. We advertise it there in the quarterly newsletter, and then when we had our annual meetings, we also advertised it as an open group. We don't have any hard requirements, but we wanted it to be a mix of owners. So someone that maybe only had a few properties, some that had properties in larger multifamily buildings, some that had duplexes or single family homes, and then also space throughout our jurisdiction. So we didn't have any hard requirements. We just wanted to make sure that it was a mix. And we've had anywhere from like 10 to 6 show up at any time. And otherwise on the email list, I think there's like 15. So we take notes and we kind of share it out to the group and what's proposed, but everything that's proposed usually is also shared at the annual meeting. So often they ask, like, for example, they wanted more training on bed bugs. And so we brought a bed bug expert to one of our annual trainings that we had with them.
Thank you. I'm just kind of breezing through the chat. And I know I have a question for Carlos, and I know he is on the phone. I'm not quite sure. I think we're having a little bit of problems unmuting him. But I know they're asking about a 1-800 number. And so I think, unfortunately, because we had some connectivity problems, I think we're going to try to work with Carlos and get some of his information, and then we can post that and share that back out with the group, because I know he had a lot of great things to share and talk, and unfortunately we just had a little bit of a connectivity problem. So hopefully we'll work with him and try to get some of his information, great information that he shared, back out to the group once we get the recording and the PowerPoint posted. See, so I think we're got through most of the questions. I know we're running a little bit up against time. So I just wanted to, again, thank everybody. Thank you, Carlos, Dee, Gail, and Karina for taking your time today and sharing with us, and also for really participating in a lot of the group discussions that we had with PHAs. A lot of the things that we heard from you were really some best practices, and we're incorporating it. Thank you very much for all of your time today and previously. Just going through a couple of remaining things on the slides. If we do have questions and you think of them later, or if we were not able to get to them today, I'm sorry. I know we weren't able to answer everything, but you can please go ahead and feel free to send us an email at hcv@firstpick.org. If we can't answer that, we can pass that along to the Landlord Task Force. And just some other upcoming things. We do have some symposiums coming up. We have some regional symposiums coming up. We did recently have a symposium that took place, a virtual that took place in California and centered on VASH, and that is posted. So some parts were a little bit California specific, but there are definitely some things that are applicable to all PHAs. So if you're interested, you can check that out. We did just publish our second quarterly newsletter, and if you did not get that, you can sign up for it. Sign up on the mailing list. You can see the link below, Landlord Task Force at HUD.gov. You can also find the link to join that on the website. And again, here it is. I know I've been promoting this a lot, the HUD HCV Landlord Resources webpage. It's continually being updated. There's some great information on there. There's a great video that was just posted. So please go ahead and check that out if you haven't done so already. And the final chapters, the Landlord Focused Customer Service chapter, as well as the intro, conclusion, and entry points. Those chapters will be published shortly. We'll go ahead and send a link out. And then I think we'll have our final webinar sometime this winter and go over those remaining pieces, the introduction and conclusion. And then we also, like I said, have the entry points and the choosing your strategies. And what those two chapters really are designed to do is, we know there's a lot of information. The guidebook is quite lengthy. So the choosing your strategies is really designed to help PHAs sort of figure out which of these many strategies might be a best fit for you to implement. So we try to walk through some of that decision-making process. And then the entry points is just sort of a pull-out document showing some easier, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit because it's not that, but some simpler strategies that you can implement pretty easily without really a large investment of time or staff. So keep checking the website for those pieces of information. And then again, please feel free to email us. I'll put our website or email address back up there. So again, thank you everybody so much for joining us. Thank you again to our panelists. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. We will have this posted and share the PowerPoint and let you know when that becomes available. But thanks so much. I hope everybody has a great week.